So the next speaker that I want to welcome to the stage is Mike Hill. Mike, okay, there you are. So Mike is an associate and design resilience leader for Gensler, and he has more than 13 years of experience in architecture and planning. And he previously lived and worked in Hawaii, where he actually focused on resort master planning and design. And then he also worked in Utah, where he won a number of awards in planning, including an APA Outstanding Achievement Award and for his vision planning. And he's also a subject matter expert on the AIA National's Resilience Education Working Group, in which he focuses on developing resilience courses for architects. So welcome.
So I'm going to take off the practitioner hat and not tell you about what it means to be an architect designing buildings. I'm going to put on my hat about what it means to build social infrastructure that helps promote resilience. Prior to, or in between my transitions in planning and architecture, I actually did research for a group funded by FEMA where we developed courses on disasters. So I am a disaster geek. I love the crazy stuff and the crazy images. I look at them in awe and wonder. I often say, so I wrote a dissertation on hurricanes and hurricane resilient design, and I love and hate hurricanes because of that, right? I love to see what they do, but I also understand the deeper impacts of what happens during a hurricane. So I really want to start with these big ideas of resilience. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change defines resilience as the ability of a social or ecological system to absorb disturbances while retaining the same basic structure and the ways of functioning and the capacity of self-organization and the capacity to adapt to stress and change. And also the EcoDistrict protocol calls it the capacity of cities to function so that all people are able to withstand the shocks and stresses they encounter. And the reason I want to start with this idea is it's about community. It's essentially about community. And IPC is sort of, this is the definition that's been inherited and it's sort of, I guess, accepted by the larger resilience community of the definition of resilience. And why I want to talk about communities is this bigger idea that we're all interconnected. We're all about community and we're all about social infrastructure. There's two things I've learned in my research. It's one, resilience is only as good as the weakest link, and two, it's only about as good as what you put into it. So this is an image from Hurricane Ike in Texas, in Gilchrist, and this is an engineer's house, and he put a little more time into his house, but what we notice is that what good is it to live there anymore, right? Why do you want to go back there? There's no one there. We've lost our social infrastructure. We lost our community. We lost our people. But also there's also sort of this flip side of it when natural disasters happen, is that you see things like this. Our connections and our relationships come out, and those social networks start to invest back in the community, and we engage because we all want to help each other. And I want to show you a really important social network, a network that first off, I want to talk about communities. We're all part of different communities, whether it's through hobbies, through our vocations, through our location, but they all influence who we are, and we have influences back in those communities. We all are part of these communities. We've all branched out today and through the last few days and built and expanded those communities beyond ourselves. We've expanded into new friendships, new partnerships, people that we can leverage, people that we can work with to help come back to our individual communities, to bring ideas that we did not have before, to benefit those communities. So now I want to talk about a really important network. This is the network of my 3-year-old daughter. She has grandparents in Utah, grandparents in Hawaii, uncles in Idaho, and family in Texas that she all knows personally because of, and I'm here, obviously up here in Minneapolis, but we all get to talk. We all use Skype, we use FaceTime, and that network is so much broader that it oftentimes has become a benefit and has also become a drawback in how we engage. Because the truth is, do we know who our neighbor is? Can you reach out to someone next door and say, can I borrow an egg? Can I borrow an egg? I was talking to Kristen from beautiful PB, and she's like, the other day, our dryer went out, and I had to ask my neighbor to use their dryer. And I'm like, and I thought to myself, could I ask my neighbor to use their dryer? I'm like, I don't know if I could, and my network's not that tight, and I need to go back to my community, and I need to build that network. I need to have that relationship, because those are the people in natural disasters that we rely on. My daughter's network here will benefit her as she grows and as she learns, and our network here will benefit us. But in time of disaster, all of these people are not going to be there with us. They're not going to be there helping charge our communities and help them become more resilient. It's the people inside those individual communities that builds resilience. I'm going to tell you a story about a little community called Nanakuli on the west side of Oahu in Hawaii. So I had the opportunity to work with Nanakuli when I was doing research for FEMA. And they had reached out to us because they wanted to be more resilient. And a little bit of information about Nanakuli. Nanakuli is a population of about 13,000 people, predominantly Native Hawaiian. Just to the south of the point there is a power station and one of the main power supplies. But ironically enough, in the event of natural disaster, Nanakuli is actually the last community on the island to get power back because they have no critical infrastructure and they have no critical facilities. So all the power generation goes back to the city, and Nanakuli is left standing on their own. Now, a couple people had created a CERT group, which is a citizen emergency response team that's trained by the emergency planning group in Hawaii, and they actually help them to prepare for natural disasters. And they realized, hey, you know what? We're kind of screwed if there's a natural disaster. We're not going to get the help we need because we don't have these things. So we need to do something ourselves. So what they did is they started to build their network. And they realized they can connect with their community, they can connect with the school, and they had this big church that was there because we all have those networks like that in our societies and communities. And then they said, hey, you know what would be really great is if we have this group that we know is working on natural disasters comes in and helps us. So we came back in and we kind of try to fit ourselves we're from the University of Hawaii, and we start bridging gaps. And this is where we were able to come in as practitioners, not to come and give ideas or come and be some sort of great being to here is the answer to community resilience, but we're able to come in and facilitate. We're coming in able to listen and to respond and to help these individuals hear their own ideas come to life. We did this through SWOT analysis. We all know what a SWOT analysis is, right? It's about looking at strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. We're able to stop back and we're able to look and say, okay, you guys are really, really great at community because there's this wonderful word in Hawaii, which is hanai. And hanai is family. And that's why I have aunties, I have cousins. You know, it's this amazing relationship that I'll be in a park and a little kid will run up to me and go, Uncle, can you tie my shoe? Because we're all connected, we're all family. And that idea is a big strength in Hawaii. That's how I know that when time comes, I can rely on my neighbor. Weakness is they didn't know what to do. And we were able to help them to see, okay, what can we do? How can we help you? Opportunities, there's so much growth. There's so much opportunity there. There's opportunity to expand their networks. There's opportunity to work with the state. There's opportunities to recognize where their needs are and how to help those. There's threats. They're isolated. They're separated. And how do we turn those threats into opportunities? You know, we looked at rapid visual screening surveys. These are amazing. Because if you can get a community engaged, like Nanakuli, and allow them to walk through a community, they are able to identify all of the problems that happen in their community because they know their community. They're able to sit back and say, oh, you know what, that floods all the time. Or when there's rain, this thing happens. Or when there's wind, this tree always falls down. Or, you know, there's something like that. And that's what we use them for. We use them to help us identify all of these bigger issues that sometimes we overlook because we're looking through a lens of what we do and not from who they are. They walk through the community, and it doesn't have to be everybody. But what's nice is when you get a group of people together that has a practitioner, community members, and all of us, we start to identify different issues, and we start to bridge those gaps. The next thing is asset mapping. And asset mapping is such a huge thing, is knowing where your benefits are and what you have. For Nanakuli, as we sat down with them, we started to talk about what do you have available to you? And they're like, oh yeah, well so-and-so has a backhoe. So if the road gets closed, he can pull out the street. And we're like, okay, well, what happens if his house gets flamed? He's like, I don't know. Oh, and then the principal of the school goes, well, he can pull the backhoe up onto the football field. And then they said, oh yeah, so-and-so has generators. And if you guys know Hawaii, there's someone's like, well, everybody's got a rice cooker. We got to make sure the rice cookers are back up there. And you start to see how these assets of these small things can start to become benefits, and that these connections in communities start to benefit everybody else. That when the natural disaster comes, they have their backhoe somewhere safe. They know where it's placed. They know where they have rice cookers, because in a natural disaster, for whatever reason, Hawaii, the things that run out of Costco are bags of rice and toilet paper. We can't figure out why, but that's what happens because everyone has their rice cookers. But importantly, it's about understanding those assets and helping them locate them, and then helping them put them somewhere safe in natural disasters. So they have those elements available to them readily. This is an amazing asset map. This is a map that is in, I think it's Seattle, and it's, these are all locations of places for people to get food at a cheaper rate. So thinking of this in a different sphere, like this is where you can find a cheap meal that you wouldn't find in the city anywhere else. These asset maps don't have to be about things, but they're about opportunities. They're about the things that we can provide people to build more resilient communities. Mitigation plans. This is where we really can come in and benefit, because we have these bigger ideas as practitioners, and we have these understandings of what we can do, right? And by coming in and helping them plan for these shocks and stresses, they're no longer issues. We have a plan in place. It's not coming to the city afterwards to do disaster recovery. It's about mitigation at the beginning, because that's what prepared us to be more resilient. These are communities from FEMA that have mitigation and hazard mitigation plans and their status that they've completed, in progress, and they're working on it. And it's amazing to see all those plans, but do the communities know they have a plan? Do they know what the plan is? Are they involved in that plan making? And I think that's the bigger thing, is as we engage them, they'll bring up ideas and issues that we never see and we never understand. A perfect example that we're experiencing over in the island is we're dealing with daylight flooding, right? Have anyone heard of daylight flooding? So daylight flooding is an issue with sea level rise, where we're actually having flooding that during the high tide, our streets are flooding because of tidal fluctuations and sea level rise. And we actually have fish swimming out of our rain gutters into the streets and then going back down because it's brackish seawater. Now, you see it once or twice, and if you don't know what's happening, you never hear about it. But these community members know. They're like, oh yeah, that happens like every 3 or 4 weeks. And you're like, it happens every 3 or 4 weeks. Why don't you say anything? They're like, well, it's always happened. And you're like, well, if it's always happened, why don't you say anything? They're like, well, nothing ever happens, right? But it's because they're not engaged. They can offer us ideas and perspective that is beyond our sphere. And in closing, I just want to talk and just kind of, lean on that idea that as we, each of us here, expand those networks, we have the opportunity to take the expertise we have in this room and bring it back to these communities we're working with in these eco-districts or whoever they may be, but to broaden that network and help them to see their potential and help them to grow their potential. Thank you.